Let's talk about bidding for your Amazon ads. We'll talk about sort of the range of bidding, what happens if you bid too high, what happens if you bid too low, what's a sweet spot. My caveat is that some of this is going to vary by genre. If you're in a genre where there are hundreds of thousands of authors promoting their books in that same genre with Amazon ads, your bids are probably going to need to be a little higher for you to get some visibility. And if you're in a super niche genre, you might be able to bid a little bit lower than what I'm recommending here. So in general, if you're bidding like 1 to 20 cents, it's too low. Nothing's going to happen. In a way, that's good news. Nothing happens, which means you don't get charged or anything. But in general, it's going to be really hard for you to set up an ad with like a 20 cent or lower bid and have Amazon show that ad to anybody. Not impossible, but pretty rare. In the 21 to 25 cents, this is on a more reasonable level. It's still fairly low, and so some of your ads probably are not going to do anything if you're bidding this low, but some might turn on, and this would be a good sweet spot for you if you found that you just wanted to have a low number of ads, spending a low amount of money each month, and especially if you're advertising a book that's like $2.99 or less, and it's, harder to make back any of that money, especially if you're talking about like a 99-cent book. This could be a good kind of range of bids if you're in that case. For most people, though, setting up bids like below 25 cents, what's likely going to happen is that most of them just won't really turn on. You won't get any or hardly any impressions, which means you're not getting charged, but it also means people aren't seeing your book or clicking on it. So now we've got conservative bidding set in the high 20s, 26 to 30 cents or so. It's kind of conservative bidding. It's a really good amount, I think, for people who are just starting out with ads, who have a limited budget, who feel kind of nervous. It's going to make it so it's going to be pretty hard for you to overspend and lose tons of money. The bigger risk, like these other bids, is that nothing's going to happen. You're going to set up these ads and like maybe it'll show to a few thousand people and maybe you'll get 1 or 2 clicks. But when you're just starting out, especially like I said, if you've got a pretty small budget or are real nervous about diving into ads, high 20s is probably a decent place to start. When you're in like the 30 to 40 cent range, that tends to be a sweet spot for many authors. Authors in really crowded genres definitely would want to do more like in the high 30s, maybe even low 40s. But in general, anywhere between like 31 and 40 cents, consider that a pretty good sweet spot for most authors in most genres at most price points. It's enough that you should be getting at least, half of your ads to turn on or so. And it should also be not so much that you risk losing tons of money like you can the higher you bid. So that brings us to like the 40 to 60 cent range. This is only advisable if your book can sustain a higher bid and if you've done a tiny bit of testing and you know that Amazon ads convert well for you as well. So you know that you can not only get clicks, but that those clicks can convert to sales. A great place to use bidding in this range would be if you've got a series that you know makes you a lot of money in either series read through or page reads or both. In those cases, you can definitely test the waters with like a 40 to 60 cent bid. 60 cents going to be on the higher side for sure. But if you've got a series that converts very, very well, and you get additional revenue per sale of that from page reads or from series read through or things like that, the 40 to 60 cent range is probably going to be one that you'll settle into. You can definitely start in the more conservative side of things, but don't be surprised if you find a sweet spot in like the 40 to 60 cent range. So the 60 to 80 cent range, I called this the aggressive bidding. It's one to use with caution. This would be really good if you wanted to do something like sell 1,000 copies of a 99-cent ebook in 1 week. You weren't worried about getting immediate profit from that book, especially if it's 99 cents. But if you're all about the rank or all about the sales, or you really just want to launch a book with a big old splash, the 60 to 80 cent range can do that for you. It's going to be harder to earn a profit. And so sometimes this works really well for short-term strategies where really it's more about just the volume of book sales. If you're trying to hit the USA Today list or something like that, or just have a really strong launch, it's going to be one that's harder to sustain like long term, month in and month out at these bids, but it's not impossible for sure. So just be careful. I wouldn't encourage an author who's new to the Amazon ads platform to start at bids this high, but you might find that there are times where you're going to bid that high and do really well. And then anything above 80 cents in general, probably not recommended. There's going to be very few cases where you need to bid that high in order to gain visibility. But I should mention that this can be treated kind of in the same way as like gas prices or inflation or any of these things. It's pretty much expected that these numbers are just going to go up with time. It's going to be very rare that they're going to go down with time. So just keep that in mind. You know, a year from now, it could be that like over $1 is kind of the aggressive stage or things like that. And you just need to remember sort of what works for you and what kind of ad spend you can sustain. And here's one more thought to throw out there. It can feel a little bit discouraging to hear me say something like, yeah, these prices are just going to get more and more expensive. So 2 things that you can hold on to and kind of frame your thinking around. One is that how great is it that you're diving into ads now as opposed to 3 years from now, when maybe like all these numbers you're going to have to multiply by 3 to get an accurate picture, right? Yes, it's true. 3 or 4 years ago, you could get clicks for less than 10 cents fairly easily. You could set your bids in the teens and your ads would go. But there are so many more authors advertising on Amazon now that those numbers aren't practical. So first of all, be glad you're doing it now and getting your feet wet now, as opposed to when they're even more expensive. And the other thing that I think is great about Amazon ads is it's actually helping the indie author community become even more professional, because almost anybody can make a profit if they can buy a click for 2 or 3 cents, right? I mean, even if it took you 200 clicks to make one sale, you could find a way to be profitable if you're just paying like 2 cents per click, but we're not. We're paying like 30 or 40 cents per click. And so we need to be as optimized as possible. So what this means is we need great covers, great blurbs, great sales pages, great marketing, great market research in order to even like dream of being competitive in this atmosphere. And what it does is it really helps the indie author community to come across as even more professional, which is going to help all of us, right? So back when you could get clicks from sponsored ads for like 2 or 3 cents, and the only sponsored ads that people saw were like amateurish looking covers with typos in the title and things like that, that would give sponsored ads a really negative connotation. But now, if you go onto an Amazon sales page, the sponsored ads really are indistinguishable from the also bots or things like that. Now, I mean, we know the difference because we know what sponsored means, right? But to a reader, those books that are showing up are professional quality, and so we have no reason to feel ashamed. It's actually a great way to challenge all of us in the author community to make sure that we are playing big. We're in the big leagues now. So if you're going to pay to play, like make sure you've got all of your things lined up, well optimized, great cover, great blurb, all of those things. So again, don't get too discouraged if you see that your bids are going up, or if you hear an author from a few years ago talking about like 15-cent clicks or things like that. Just, it is what it is. And it's actually challenging us as indie authors to be even more professional.